Hello, good evening.
I know.
It is so lovely to be here in Cambridge.
Isn't it amazing? I'm so sorry, we're just a few minutes late, but if I said to you, well, what were you and Patty talking about that slightly delayed you? Do you think they'd ever guess?
No, not in a million years. Do you know what we were talking about? Alpacas.
Alpacas. So what, essentially, Patty, you were saying to me, you were just advising me that an alpaca was where it was at. This is where I should go. Not sheep, not donkeys, too much trouble with the feet. You have alpacas and you say they're just joyful.
They are. They make me laugh because they're the most stupid of animals. And they're also low maintenance.
Yeah.
And they're very good at eating the grass.
So they are a mower.
They're a mower.
You don't have to do much with them.
No, and I call them, and they behave like cats in a way that I'll call them, and they come towards me they're very intrepid and quiet, and I want to give them some apples. And then I give them some apples, and I'm about to move my arm, and they jump in the air, and they are just so skittish. And sometimes I call them, and they won't come, rather like cats.
Won't come if that's what they think you want.
They're anyway, they are amusing. They have ears that stick up all the time as if they're totally questioning everything in life. But we all should be anyway, so...
So, Patty, I think the phrase that you used, which I will repeat, because was an excellent rule for just getting through life with the minimum of worrying about, gradations of things. You said you don't need to do much to look after an alpaca. It's either alive or it's dead. And I thought, okay, that's marvellous.
Yes.
So very good. I'm going to go and research alpacas. Thank you very much. There was a point to this, which is that we were talking about where you live in Sussex, where you have a photographic studio. You do all sorts of work in all sorts of places, and you live in London for some of the time. But you have your studio at home in Sussex, don't you? And photography is your life now, your main passion now.
It's my passion, and it has been my passion for many years. There's nothing more exciting for me than to look through a lens and photograph, and then I know when I have the best photograph. I just know. It's almost as my heart stops. I stop breathing. I know I've captured it. To capture something that's alive, is really, it's exciting. I love it very much.
What I'd like to talk to you about is this incredible book full of photographs, most of them taken of you, and many of them taken of you in the 1960s. And what I'd really love you to do is conjure up the world that we see in this book. And perhaps we should begin by saying that your childhood was you weren't brought up in London. You had a very peripatetic childhood, in many ways quite disrupted at various points. You moved between countries. You spent a lot of your childhood in Kenya. You were very far from the scene of the swinging 60s when they finally arrived, weren't you? What was that childhood like?
I was very lucky to be brought up in Kenya, and from the age of 4 till I was about 9. And it was very inspiring, and it was wild. I got used to seeing snakes or wild animals here and there in the garden, wherever. But I don't know, I think and also it was a bit, it wasn't like living in London, and it was a most extraordinary childhood. Anyway, at the age of... And I was used to not wearing shoes, slightly wild myself. And then my family moved to England, and I went to girls' boarding school, where I was telling them about, some cheetahs and some, lions and snakes, and they thought, oh, she's a bit mad, can't talk to her. And I realised I'd have to shut up and listen to what the girls talk about, and then try and join in their conversation. So I really felt like an outsider. Anyway, I joined the best gang of all the different girl gangs at school. And then, school life sort of came to an end. And in those days, we weren't encouraged to do anything particular with our lives. I think we were at school to be taught how to behave properly in every area, and then find a very nice man and get married, and that's the end. I thought, that's the end of my life? It can't be true. And I refused to do any sort of secretarial college because I didn't want to be tied down to anything, 9 to 5, which sounded boring to me. I knew there had to be something else out there. I just knew it. So, of course, I got a little job with Elizabeth Arden. My mother insisted I did. And while I was there, a woman came up and asked me if I've ever thought about being a model. So I had to tell a little fib, and so I said no, but I had, of course.
Had you? Had you?
Well, because I'd seen all these lovely glamorous magazines, Vogue and Harper's and Tatler, and they all looked so amazing and fabulous and, a whole fantasy life. And I thought, God, that would be amazing. Anyway, so to my delight, she said, please come and see me next week. And she was the editor of a teen magazine, sort of fashion teen magazine. So I went to see her, and her photographer was brought out and summoned to photograph me immediately. And they were very pleased with the photographs and then introduced me to my agent, who signed me up immediately. I mean, it's as if by magic.
So this is just all happening. Your life is essentially changed entirely in a very short space of time.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously this promised great excitement for me. But then the hard work, of course, was trying to persuade photographers to photograph me, then I could have a nice portfolio to take around and show other people what a good model I could be, which, of course, I wasn't at all, And that's how it all started. You have to keep going and seeing people, seeing magazines, and eventually jobs would come in.
Tell us a little bit about this. This is London not that very much after the war. There is still a great feeling of the aftermath of the Second World War. Rationing has been in place until, within very recent memory. There's a sense of the restrictiveness of England then. And it's all about to explode into a scene. But of course, we're saying that with hindsight. I wonder what it felt like at the time. Did you and the people that you were spending time with know that something was afoot, that everything was going to change?
Well, I sort of sensed there was something in the air, something was going to be happening. I knew I didn't want to dress like my mother. I didn't want to wear, twin sets and pearls. I just had this really strong feeling that we were moving a big step forward. And I met a girlfriend who we shared a flat off King's Road in Chelsea. And then just walking on King's Road, see people were changing. Suddenly the men, they were boys, were growing their hair longer and they were looking nicer. And all the girls were wearing clothes that were very different from their mothers. And then, of course, Mary Quant emerged, designing the most fabulous clothes, really wonderful clothes. And I think she was the first person to design miniskirts, although some people say Courrèges was the first one. But I think it was Mary Quant, really. And she had the most amazing geometric ideas that she transported onto her dresses. So, and if you think about Vidal Sassoon, who was like the 60s hairdresser then, and cut her hair in such a geometric way, it was absolutely beautiful and chic and smart. And
it was all about, too, wasn't it, freedom and movement. You might wear a dress that didn't require huge amounts of corseting and cinching in and length. You would wear something that meant you could dance and you could move and you could walk and your hair was lower maintenance and all this sort of thing. It was about a kind of freedom. I wonder if that was something that you all sensed as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do think you're right there. But you see, Mary was very clever because the skirts were getting so short. And, you don't want people to look up your skirt if you're climbing upstairs on the top floor of a bus. So she made the most fabulous, thick coloured tights that would go with the dresses. So that was very clever. That was all taken care of.
I mean, going forward a few years, you wore a Mary Quant dress to be married in, didn't you? So it was clearly like
Not quite. Mary designed a coat for George and a coat for me. His was black Mongolian lamb, absolutely beautiful, soft and delicious and fabulous. And mine was a red fox coat, short, which of course we wouldn't wear now, but
But was quite thrilling at the time.
Very thrilling and glamorous.
I wonder obviously she died very recently, and I wonder if that did feel to you like some kind of ending of an era, a passing of an era. I mean, she was a very, very, very notable talent, wasn't she?
She was, and she realised that there was going to be a movement. She realised that something was happening in the sort of Zeitgeist, and I think she must have been about 23 or 24 when she was designing amazing clothes, and thought we should go to America, conquer America. So me and a few other models went with Mary Quant and Alexander, her husband, to New York, and we wore her lovely short dresses, skipped around, danced around the most fabulous Astoria Hotel in New York, and we danced in nightclubs, and it's like, oh my God, what's happening? The Brits are here, oh my God, this is exciting. And it worked. Mary really pulled it off well. But at the same time, a girlfriend told me recently, she was working for Mary Quant and selling makeup, and she was sent, age 19, to different parts of the world to show how makeup should be done.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
So there was an idea of us still sort of exporting this culture because the scene was here, the scene was in London.
Yeah, but Mary was wise. She knew that this scene that she realised that was obviously bubbling in King's Road in Chelsea, she wanted to export it. And she did it very well.
Tell us a little bit about the fact that, as you tell us in the book and you've spoken about it previously, the idea we have of modelling and of supermodels and of the high fashion industry, well, we use the word industry. It wasn't an industry when you started doing it, was it? You were doing your own makeup and your own hair and all this kind of thing. There was a much more do-it-yourself sort of low-fi, homespun kind of thing. What was it like? Try to put us in one of those modelling studios.
All right, Alex. So I would get a phone call from my agent, because no mobile phones then, get a phone call and saying, I have to be a certain place, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I must bring some court shoes, different colours, jewellery, wigs, if I have any, or hair pieces, and makeup, hair brushes, etc. And then I'd go to the studio with a heavy bag. You could always spot models in those days with a very heavy bag to carry around. And then you get to the studio and have to do your own makeup and hair and see what clothes we're going to wear. And I'd look at the clothes and I was told what I was going to be wearing. And for me, it was like, oh, it's a fantasy. How lovely. I'm going to be wearing this dress. And so I go into sort of fantasy mode of imagining who would wear this, where they're going, what's it going to be like, what is life like. This is why, when I look now at the photographs in my book, I can't remember any of them because it wasn't really me.
Really?
Do you see?
Really?
Because I created a fantasy for myself.
Yeah.
And so I could go onto the set and be photographed and, and I could do whatever I wanted to do, and that was it.
A lot has been said about talking about your huge success as a model and about the look that people were trying to emulate, that it was about a kind of vision of a sort of innocence, that you would look wide-eyed and open-mouthed and innocent rather than knowing and especially sort of worldly or sophisticated. Is that how it felt to you, or did that happen much more by accident and we're inventing that looking back at it?
I think it was by accident. One of my very first photographic jobs was with a wonderful old-school photographer called John French. And I was being photographed with a lot of other women, and these women were very high-class, sort of aristocratic models from the 50s. So there was all of them and, me in the front, looking extremely young and very different from all of them, who were highly coiffured with most beautiful jewellery and, very elegant, etc. And then the 60s came along, and I think we broke away from that. And we didn't want that stiff look any longer. We wanted the freedom, as you spoke about earlier.
Yes.
And that was very interesting. And also John French was a very fine photographer. And I thought, on reflection, I thought it was quite amusing because he would line us all up, told us where to sit, and then he would say, and he'd light it all perfectly, and then he would say to his assistant, okay, 1, 2, 3, and there's a click, and the assistant would click. So he never actually touched the camera.
So he was the art director?
He was the art director.
Really?
Yeah.
And there were, as you said, there were all these kind of rather sort of ravishing sets, and there was a kind of playfulness to so much of the photography. Then you were put in all sorts of interesting, funny and different situations and positions. When you came back to look at this book as you made it, as you put these photographs together, what were some of your sort of favourite shoots to remember? You write about them a little bit, but tell us this evening.
I mean, they are actually a bit of a blur. Obviously, there are some I remember. I really remember the photographs taken by David Bailey, simply because he was so rude.
Really?
Yes.
Rude how? I mean...
Well, I mean, you know, he would say, come on, do something, you know. Imagine I'm going to kiss you. And oh, my God. Oh, you know, and then he'd say, oh, you're so wonderful, so beautiful. And then you start thinking, oh, I might believe this. And then you sort of respond to his whatever he was saying. And so he had different ways of trying to get a reaction from the models.
Yes. And did that feel like... I mean, it was a very male-dominated industry in the sense that it was the men who were taking photographs of you, not women, wasn't it?
There were probably 2 female photographers at the time, fashion photographers, and it was always great to work with them.
Just a totally different experience, though, I imagine.
Yes, to an extent, but always when there was a fashion shoot, there would be the editor of the magazine or maybe the advertising people. So there was a group of people. So in a way, it was quite similar, but it was much nicer to be working with a female photographer.
Tell us a little bit about some of the other sorts of things that were going on in this scene in London. We do have this idea, we get it from oral histories and from film and from the music and all the sort of artefacts of the 60s, but what was it like? What was London like then? The music, the going out in the evenings, what did you do?
Well, I think London was on the verge of breaking out into a most fantastic city. There were so many creative people around. I think about Ossie Clark immediately, who I absolutely adored. He was such a great designer, and he would design dresses for us models, whoever he was hanging out with that day, you know, he'd design a nice little dress for us. And he was fantastic. And then, of course, you know, the music was getting better and better. And we think of David Hockney, who was suddenly producing amazing paintings. And so there was art in every arena, I would say, that was changing and becoming more, just complete change. The only area, I think, that didn't really work in the 60s was architecture.
You mean because it became very brutalist?
No, because I think...
Why do you think that was?
Because they were trying... There was clearly a lot of bomb damage everywhere. And so they had to design properties, houses, flats, whatever they were, businesses, as cheaply as they could. So very little money was spent on the actual design. I mean, now it's all changed because there's a lot of money around. But I think, you know, there was money for fashion, money for films, art of in every area, but architecture. Only my opinion.
Yes.
I mean, what do I know?
But you got... Well, you were there and you were looking closely. So, I mean, what struck me so much looking at some of those pictures and reading your captions and notes to them, I mean, you were so young. You were so young. And to keep your kind of head and to sort of be existing in this world, doing the jobs that you were doing, mixing with the people you were mixing with, it must have seemed like a dazzling sort of whirl.
Well, you know, you could say that because, you know, that's on reflection. And everybody has become far more iconic now with time. I think that's what happens. But at the time, you know, we all were used to seeing the Rolling Stones hanging around, We just think, oh, I think the Stones are recording this evening. Let's go and see them. You know, everything was so
no big deal.
easy.
Yeah.
Nothing was a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was very easy, and we could just go wherever we wanted. One, there wasn't quite so much traffic. Two, the police were very kind and sweet to us in those days. And I remember being in a car with Ozzy Clark, and he said, let's go and see the Stones record. And I jumped into his car, and he was driving down the wrong way, in a one-way street. And I think, is this dangerous or not? Oh, well, I'm with Ozzy. Does it matter? You know, everything seemed possible. You know.
So there was this great sense of optimism, because we think of it as an optimistic time. I mean, that was sort of what people were being told in the post-war era, prosperity and peace. It felt like everything was possible for you.
Absolutely, it did. And my mother and my stepfather had no idea what I was doing. They you know, because they're very conservative. And also they'd lived through the war and everything that you're talking about, all the restrictions. And suddenly, you know, I'm there doing exactly what I want. You know, like an extension of my childhood, really.
Yes.
And also, as the dresses were getting shorter, it's like being a very young girl again.
Well, that's interesting.
It was young and playful, the whole thing. And
but that's interesting. There was something sort of childlike about that time, about these...
It was an innocence.
Yes, yeah.
And I think probably this is a reflection of how serious our parents had become. And they'd obviously lost family members and friends during the war. And, you know, they were still sad, I think. We broke away from that. We wanted something else. There had to be something else. We can't carry on mourning forever.
Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you capture in this book. Then you do become really well known. You become quite well known as a model. You're on, the covers of everything, Vanity Fair and Vogue, and there you are. And you start to move in the circles of very famous people. At points, that's problematic, isn't it? It's certainly problematic when your life intersects with Beatlemania, isn't it? And we see some evidence of that in the book too.
Well, I must tell you something that just I'd completely forgotten until I looked at the book. And to meet people like the Rolling Stones, everyone thinks, oh, the Rolling Stones, how exciting. But when I met them and I was photographed with them, I was wearing the most ghastly dress. And it was down to here. And, you know, I'm posing with them looking, you know, stupid. And they're all very young. And I thought, that's not awful. And then, when I met the Beatles, same horror. I had to wear a school uniform. And I felt as if I hadn't been out of school that long. So, you know... Anyway, they're all friends anyway, so that's so funny. But see, nobody was that important at that time. So before they became very important and very well known, normal people.
Yeah, sure. But when they did, and there you were, you know, married into that situation, that level of scrutiny and indeed outright jealousy from many fans must have been very alarming for you.
It was very alarming. It was alarming. I was sort of amazed that people could be so fanatical about somebody I've taken for granted. Not really taken for granted, but somebody I love, you know, the guys, I thought they were great fun. I went to see the Beatles in concert in Hammersmith. And George said to me, you've got to, with your friends, leave before the end. Like one song before the end. So I got up to leave and walked out of through this passageway with my friends. And these girls ran after me, they were kicking me and pulling my hair. I thought, this is extraordinary. And because I was going out with George. And I realised this is something that I'd never come across in my life. People could behave like this. And also the jealousy was amazing. I mean, fans used to write, when George and I moved into a house in Isha, a hideous house, but anyway, we moved there, and it was... We'd get all sorts of letters from fans, mainly for George, a few sort of hate things for me, because, you know, I was irritatingly in the way. And we had a cat called Corky, the cat. And one day we'd gone out to see some friends, and we came back, and the box of letters that I was to take to the office, fan mail, so they could deal with it, had been tipped over, and the floor was covered in letters, and one had been opened. And I looked at the envelope, and it was for Corky the cat. Somebody had put catnip in it and just sent it to him, and he found his letter.
He hunted out his own catnip from this vast fan pile.
Yes.
That's the power of catnip, isn't it? I suppose. But do you know, I really love those pictures of it's Kinfauns, isn't it? The bungalow, because as you said. And let's just be... It wasn't awfully nice as a piece of architecture.
It was horrible.
Was it?
Terrible.
But you've gone there to sort of escape the scrutiny of central London, the kind of oppressive sort of ness,
Yeah, well, it was becoming very difficult for George and the other guys, because fans kept, whenever they'd leave the house or the flat, there'd always be a bunch of girls there, ready for autographs or just to see them. And so Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, decided... in his wisdom, that we should all move out of London. Not too far, but, far enough.
He didn't say you had to go and live in that bungalow, though, did he?
Well, I don't know how the bungalow came to be ours. Anyway, I just thought it was the most ghastly thing I've ever seen. There's a bungalow, it's all white, and a bit of garden, and an idea of a swimming pool. Anyway, it was so hideous that, I don't know, whether George and I both went shopping, bought loads and loads of cans of paint and brushes, and we decided we should paint the outside. And we carried on painting, and we had some wine, had some drugs, and then more painting. And then one day, Mick and Marianne turned up, and we weren't in. So they saw these tins of paint and brushes and wrote on the house, on the wall, Mick and Marianne were here. No pieces of paper available.
No.
No mobile phones, no, nothing like that.
And you sort of turned it into a kind of wild sort of psychedelic shrine, really. Perhaps the more psychedelic, the more the wine and the drugs, I imagine.
I imagine you're right.
But just when you come to look back at these pictures, when you've been putting this book together, I wonder... how it feels. I mean, we all use photographs as a kind of marker of our pasts and the people that we've known and the places that we've been to. But it's we don't all assemble them into a book. What was it like bringing these all together?
Well, I thought it was a lovely idea initially when Dave Brolin, who has now disappeared, but anyway, my publisher was here. I don't know why he's gone, but maybe boring him now.
He's here.
Oh, he is here.
We just can't
Dave.
see him. Hello.
He said to me, well, I'd love to do a book of your photographs. No, actually, I asked him, and he answered me 6 years later. Yes, Patty, we'd love to do a book of your photos.
Good Lord, what happened in those 6 years, do you think? Why didn't he get back to you
maybe he
sooner?
was busy, I don't know. So anyway, I thought, it was what?
10 years.
Was it?
You let him off 4 years there.
Oof, time goes by so quickly. Anyway, so, where was I? Oh, yes, I thought, how marvellous. All my photographs that I've taken of people and, flowers and situations and holidays, and it's all going to be in a book. No, this was not Dave's idea at all. He wanted photographs of me. I hadn't thought about that. And actually, it was a very good idea. I'm allowed 2 or 3 photographs at the end of the book of photographs I've taken.
Yes, of course. Yes, and we get the idea that photography has been, as you were saying, an interest, a passion throughout your life. But you were so often in front of the lens. You didn't put yourself behind it. When did that all change?
Well, when I was modelling, the boyfriend I had at the time, who actually took the cover of the he suggested that I buy a camera and learn how to take photographs. So when I would go for modelling jobs, I'd take my camera with me and have little lessons on the side from photographers.
So that in the real sort of basics of, like how you actually take a photograph and develop it.
What you're looking for when you look through the lens.
Yes.
So, I learnt while I was working.
It was like going to... And from some of the best photographers in the world. Yeah. Amazing. When you look now at fashion photography, and it is very styled and, I mean, all sorts of things are different about it. What's your impression of it now? How do you think it's changed, I suppose?
Well, it has changed because they want a certain sort of perfection that isn't real. And also, you know, we look at some really glossy magazines and I flip through and I think, oh, I love that dress or that shirt. And I look at the price and I think, are they completely mad? These are just so expensive. So
you think that actually the fashion has changed too, as well as the means of showing it to us, the whole kind of world of fashion?
Well, yeah, I mean, fashion really is a fantasy. It's a glamorous, gorgeous fantasy. And I think what women should do is just know what colours suit them, first of all, and then know what sort of shape suits them. Not everyone should wear very long or flared trousers if they're not very tall. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. You should know your own body and not to be dictated to. Maybe they're the odd little things that you think could be fun to add, maybe, you know, a different scarf around something that's rather low-key, you know, things like that, so it becomes elegant and chic and not, you know, too fashion-conscious.
The problem is with that, Patty.
Love what you're wearing.
Thank you very much. This is what well, you bring out the good stuff if you're interviewing Patty Boyd. Do you think what is going to, you know, I'm not going to turn up in jeans, am I? But the problem is, I'm very guilty of seeing the photographs and imagining I have a different shaped body or type of body, or I'm perhaps a foot taller. How do we? This is a problem, isn't it?
It's a problem. I can see a girlfriend wearing something, I think, God, I'd love that. But then I get it, maybe, and it doesn't suit me. It suits her, but not me.
It's not. It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Very difficult lesson to learn.
It's so difficult.
But you have been in some of the greatest clothes by the greatest designers. I mean, just putting them on must have felt amazing.
Amazing, amazing. If only I was allowed to keep them.
Well, yes.
Of course, you know.
Yeah.
You have to be very honest and honourable and give them back.
Tell me this, Patty. You are so often spoken about as a muse, as such an important muse to musicians and photographers and artists. It's a very strange label to acquire, isn't it? It's a strange description, and I wonder how it feels to be the object of it.
Well, I find it very difficult to get my head around it, simply because I've always thought a muse is somebody who's painted by great painters from like the 18th century. You know, that woman is a muse for, you know, that would be a muse to me. But to be a muse for somebody who writes songs, it doesn't really ring true. Maybe I inspired because of conversations or whatever was going on in our lives. But I think the term muse is not really one that suits me.
No, it's okay. Well, one of the difficulties is we also think of muses in the modern sense. Rather difficult, isn't it? As if they're sort of rather deprived of agency there. You, the muse, are not the creator of something. You're the person who a story is attached to. I wonder if it felt like that.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't take it very seriously. No.
When you do think about, you know, a song that has been written about you, maybe it doesn't feel like that either.
It does.
Really. It does.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, tell me about
Claim
that.
it.
You claim it.
Claim it as mine.
What does it do when you're listening to it, though? I just want to know what happens if you're in a restaurant and it comes on.
That's my song. I
mean, literally, that's your song.
I love it. I love it. I get so excited. Yes. Yes. It's like part of my being. It's part of my... It's an extension of me. So I claim it. So my fingers are all mine, you know?
Yeah. And did you feel like that when those songs, you know, the songs like Something and, you know...
Well, I couldn't quite swallow it when George first played me something and said he'd written it for me. I couldn't quite grasp it.
Really?
It was too much to... You you know, I was only like, what, 21, 22, too much to grasp, you know, when you have something like that, that is, it's more than, you know, more than a deep breath. It's just difficult to swallow with that kind of information that somebody is lovingly telling you about.
When you were a little bit older, though, and you were told that the song Layla was written for you, that was different, perhaps.
That was different because I was still married, and when Eric played me this song, I felt, you know, treacherous that Eric should not have written this song for me because I was still married to George, and I felt really kind of uncomfortable, although clearly it's a really fabulous song, full of love and passion, and I just thought the timing was wrong, and it put me in a very kind of difficult position, although I loved it, obviously. You know,
Well,
it's kind of like,
of course, what also puts you, anyone, in a really difficult position is having this incredibly, you know, complicated personal life and situation, people's feelings, your own feelings, and being to some extent a sort of public property, having that all talked about in newspapers and all over the place. Did you just pay no attention?
No, we didn't read newspapers. So I never knew what was going on or what people were talking about.
Patty, tell me this. You took lots of photographs, and there's a lot of photographs that you didn't look at again until relatively recently. I mean, until this century. Why was that? And you didn't start to exhibit your own photographs for a long time. What was going on then?
Well, you know, it's like, I think when I was young, I thought, well, I won't look at what experiences I've had. I'll wait until I'm really old, you know, and I haven't got much to do, and maybe I'll have some children or grandchildren. Oh, those hopes. Anyway, and then I can show them. But then when Eric and I split up, I had all these boxes of things, and I opened one box one day, and I saw all these photographs. I thought, God, I remember taking this and that. And it was actually quite a little treasure trove. And then in those days, you see, we had to take our film to the chemist, who would then print everything in a nice little print in an envelope. And I looked at this envelope, and it said, Gary Brooker in Poland. And I'd gone to Poland with Gary Brooker. He was conducting a Polish orchestra and invited me and his wife to go along. It was great. And I thought, how lovely. You must look at these photos. So I opened the envelope, and it wasn't Gary Brooker in Poland at all. It was the Beatles in India. I thought, oh, how amazing. I didn't realise I still had them.
I mean, those photographs that you took in India were extraordinary. I mean, they are so evocative of that experience. Just tell us a little bit about them, if you would.
What, going to India?
Yes, and capturing it on film and then looking at them years later.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I was so pleased to find them. It was and also it was very nice to be able to bring back memories of this amazing time we had for 2 months in the foothills of the Himalayas, learning how to meditate with, you know, really lovely people. And also it was a time when the Beatles were sort of like quite calm, and people weren't asking for their autographs. They were very sort of calm and peaceful, and they wrote the most beautiful music while we were there. Most of those songs are on the White Album. And it's the only time that they'd been together without any intrusion from, you know, somebody saying go to the studio or needing a photo session or whatever. So they became very, very united.
How did that feel for their other halves, as it were? Because
it was lovely. It was lovely for us.
But they were a unit, and you were outside of that unit at certain points, weren't you?
Yeah, but we would have had our own unit because, you know, we have things to talk about that we wouldn't discuss in front of them. Like, you know, all relationships.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about now, before we get some questions from the audience. Tell us about now and taking photographs now. You no longer take your roll of film to be developed. You develop your films yourself, don't you? You have a dark room. You've learned every aspect of it. What most interests you about photography?
Well, I've had to say goodbye to my darkroom because really and truly it's all about digital photography now. So I had to let that go, and sadly, because I really loved being in the darkroom, processing film and then printing. And it's just like it's a magical thing that happens with chemicals and paper. Anyway, so that's that. And I just do digital photography now. And I must say, I absolutely adore photographing flowers and plants. That's what I love to do, yeah.
Actually, there is a wonderful photograph in the book. It's you and George. You've taken it with a timer, and you make the point that he's looking a bit irritable because he's impatient that your timer hasn't gone off. But what you're really interested in is how well your roses are doing. You're standing in front of a wall of your beautiful roses.
Yeah,
I loved that photograph.
Thank you. I really thought, I want to photograph the roses, but just on their own, they're just roses. But if I have somebody in front of them, it makes it a bit better. Because George was around, I'm stand here, I'll stand here, and put my camera on a tripod and put the timer on. And so we're standing there waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm looking a bit worried. And George, clearly bored with having to stand there, that he looks away. And I look at the photograph now, and I think, I bet he's thinking of music. He's thinking of a song, and I love the imperfection of that. Because a perfect photograph would be us both looking at the lens. Perfect. But that's boring. I like something that's not perfect. So by him looking away, it just makes it more interesting, I think.
I still think your roses do look lovely in that, I must say. I must say. I started this day, I don't know if anyone was there, started this day talking to Sarah Raven, the gardener, and I think she would say yes. Your roses looked very good there, so we'll start and finish the flowers. Shall we have some questions from our audience? Let's get some questions. We have some roving microphones. We don't want to ignore people upstairs, so you may shout a little bit. But who would like to start us off? My microphone is going very purposefully over here, so I think this is our first question.
Hi, Patty.
Hello.
I promised you I'd ask you a question, so here it comes. At the moment, there's a research renaissance into psychedelic drugs and how they might have positive mental health benefits. Drugs like LSD, MDMA, and ayahuasca, you said that you took in the 60s and 70s in your first book, Wonderful Today. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing what you learned from experimenting with altered states of consciousness.
Well, sir, I must say...
Are you passing them around, or...?
I must say that was not a question that I was going to ask. So you've gone there, Patty.
All I can say about psychedelic drugs is that they shouldn't be taken, casually. If you're going to take them, make sure there's someone who's straight and somebody that can look after you. With any sort of drug, I took ayahuasca when I was in Peru, and there was a shaman who was there and knew exactly what would happen to our head, and would be able to guide us so that we don't lift off, and never come back. Some people don't come back. Acid casualties, they're known as. It's you don't want to play with your head too much. It's the only head we have for this lifetime, and I think to test it to that extreme is not very clever.
Does meditation help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love meditating, and I think it's very essential. I think people don't really have much time these days in life because everybody's so busy doing what? I don't know, going round in circles. But in order to sort of calm the day before you begin, it's really nice to meditate.
Thank you. Let's have another question. Thank you very much. Who would like to ask a question? Yes.
Hi, Patty. I was just thinking, one of the photos that I love, which is of you, is a view in a field and you've got dirty feet and you're just in amongst flowers, and I just love that one. And when I was a teenager, I really helped because, like, I think you're so right, like, with, like, magazines, it's so fake, and I think that natural photography is kind of not there anymore, and I just wondered whether you thought that would come back in fashion. Like, do you think we need more of that in the magazines? Because, you know, not all girls just want to, like, it's such an unrealistic view, and I just wondered what you thought of that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a very nice question. I absolutely agree with you. But you see, we get back to this thing, the idea that they all want perfection now. And so something as real as, you know, muddy feet, because I've been running around in the grass of the garden of the ghastly house. And, and you know, and it was just, I didn't know that, it's like, you know, when in front of the rose garden, roses, if I'd taken that now, I would have done my hair, I would have worn a different bikini completely.
Oh, you do say that. You look back and think, I wore the wrong bikini.
Yeah, you see, because in those days, it was just you do whatever you do, and you don't really look forward to thinking, oh, God, in 10, 20 years' time, I'm going to look at this and think, how appalling, how awful, because it's not perfect. You know, and the only thing in life that's perfect, as far as I'm concerned, is nature. And you can't mess with it. Nature is perfect. It knows exactly what to do, when to bloom, when to go to sleep, and, you know, all of that.
Thank you. Yes.
I think you have a really beautiful, calm energy, and I wondered if that's been your whole life, and it kind of led me to think about the sort of way that people are now, and like things like the Me Too movement in Hollywood and the modeling industry as well. Did that sort of thing occur then? How have you managed to maintain the sort of innocence and calmness and the aura that you still have through all that excitement?
Some very tough times in that as well, haven't you? Thank you very much.
I really, you know, it sounds great, my childhood, but it was really difficult. At the age of 13, on my birthday, I thought, oh, God, I'm so old. No, it was serious. I mean, to think I'm old at 13 meant that I had huge responsibility. I was meant to look after my 5 brothers and sisters because my mother was just like wherever. And I think I have struggled a lot, and I've fought anything that would pull me down. I've had really bad times in between. When I split up with my second husband, I felt as if I was going through such a bad time of divorcing from one and then the other husband. And I thought, I'm nobody. Who am I? I didn't know who I was, because I'm not Mrs. Famous, George, Mrs. Famous, Eric. I am nobody. Who am I? So, you know, struggling and working through situations like that where you lose yourself, you lose who you are, you lose the will to live, you lose your sight of what life is about. And with the help of a psychotherapist, I got back on track. Oh, here I am. Okay, carry on. And but I think having a horrible experience is really good for us, you know, because you've got to fight. Nothing's of more value than if you fought for it and you've won, and then you carry on, because you know.
I mean, you really had to, particularly after your second marriage ended, you had to sort of rebuild from the ground up, didn't you? I mean, you know, you were just living in a little flat, working out how you put your life together again, what you were going to do with it. I mean, that was tough times, wasn't it?
Tough times, you know, and trying to find out who I was, because I thought I was this, you know, famous wife. Take away the fame, take away the wife, there's nothing left. I thought.
What did the psychotherapist do? I mean, that's a too complicated a question.
no,
What
let
did
me
they do? But what was the sort of where did the value of that come from, I wonder?
One thing she said to me that I will never forget is, Patty, always buy yourself a bunch of flowers just for you. Because who on earth does that? You know, we give flowers to our girlfriends, to our friends, go for lunch, for dinner, and take some flowers. But to actually be living on your own and buy yourself some flowers, it's like a mad thing to do. But it's a wonderful thing to do. Because we are of value, which we so often forget.
Thank you. Yes, there's a question just here. There's a microphone coming to you.
Is there anything left on your bucket list?
Yeah.
Thank
Of
you.
course. Of course. I love travelling. I just need more money to carry on travelling. And one place I adore going to was a place called Cartagena in Colombia. It's absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And every year they hold a literary festival. Have you been there?
No, we go to The Hague over here, but not.
Well, there's hay in Cartagena.
Yeah.
The best thing. And on the most beautiful 1920s theatres. And on stage you have writers from different countries talking to each other through a most fabulous interpreter in a glass box. And when you put on the headphones, it's translated immediately. And so to hear people from different countries communicating, great writers, by the way, talking to each other, it's an absolute joy.
Where else have you just not been to, or other experiences that you'd like to do?
Yeah, I want to go to Argentina because I want to learn how to tango dance properly.
Thank you. Was there a question down here? Did I see? Oh, yes, there. Thank you. The sort of third or fourth row back. Thank you.
Hi, Patty. I just wondered how your sense of fashion influenced the style of your famous husbands, and what was their relationship like with clothes?
Thank you. How did your style and your knowledge of fashion influence your husband's choice? What was their taste like in clothes?
Yeah. No, I would take George to all the best, new men's boutiques in the King's Road, and make sure that he bought the right things.
And you were a spotter as well, weren't you? I mean, you wrote a column about, sort of goings on from London for a while, and
That was just, America's completely mad. They would send this girl over to see me every month or so. And she made up the story. She just asked me a few questions about what's happening in London.
And you'd say, hemlines up, or something like that.
I don't know, I'm going out or whatever. And then all these girls I meet in America say, loved your column in 19 magazine. And I have to say, well, it wasn't really me.
I think, why don't you claim it, though?
Well, I suppose...
Claim it now. I mean, for goodness sake. So? All these years later, I do.
I loved writing for that magazine.
Exactly. Yes, and there was a question... Well, there's one here. Thank you. Sorry, I'm pointing over there and you're there. Thank you.
Patty,
Yes.
If you could go back and speak to young Patty, say 18, 20 years old, what would you say to her? What would be some advice that you'd give her for her future years ahead?
Thank you.
I would say to find something you love, that you're passionate about, and hang on to it no matter what happens in your life. So you've got something, something that it's almost like another part of you. It's your passion. Whether it's, for me, it's photography. For somebody else, it could be painting, could be, I don't know, anything, shoemaking. No, anything. And, hang on to that. Don't let go and try and half lead someone else's life.
Thank you. Yes, there's a question just sort of... There we go. Thank you.
Hello. I'd like to know a bit more about your thoughts on the time when you had one one of the most famous musicians of the world you were married to, George Harrison, and his great mate, Eric Clapton, was madly in love with you. And that must have been a difficult time. And am I right in thinking that he wrote "You Look Wonderful Tonight" to you?
You are?
The great songs of the 20th century.
I'll tell you how that happened. We were invited to a party, and we'd sort of forgotten about it, really. And Eric was playing his guitar as usual every day. And I said, oh my God, we should go soon. We're meant to be at this party in West Sussex somewhere. And so I said, I'm just going to go upstairs and get dressed. I went upstairs and I thought, oh, what am I going to wear? And I put on dresses and skirts and trousers and hair up, hair down. That whole conundrum that girls can have. And shoes, boots, the whole thing. Jewellery, no. Anyway, I finally went downstairs and I thought, Eric's going to be so annoyed with me because I've taken far too long. And to my amazement, he said, oh, listen to this I've just written. And it was wonderful tonight. And so I'd given him the time, unconsciously, obviously, to write this song. And that was in 1974, 5-ish, around that time. Last year, 2022, Jimmy Page told me that it was his party we were going to.
Really?
Yes.
And did you get there? Did you ever get to the party? You did.
Oh,
you
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yes. And what do you think about that song when you hear it now? Is it another one that you think, yes, this is my song?
Yes, I do. Because I know it really is.
It really is.
It's like, it was a live song. He wrote it as it was happening.
God, how amazing. I think we've got time for one more. Who would... Yes, I can see a hand just up there. Thank you.
As a young person today, hearing you talk about your time around the King's Road sounds absolutely idyllic. And I think a lot of young people feel like with technology and the pandemic and raising rent prices that these sort of exciting, bustling communities are no longer really an option. So I was wondering what advice you'd give to people in their early 20s to try and create that amazing opportunity that you had when you were younger.
Thank you. That's a lovely question for us to end on. Thank you.
Yeah. It's very difficult. You see, the thing is that in the 60s, there weren't so many people. There weren't so many cars. There wasn't so much traffic. And I don't know how to relate to that now because there's just too much. There's so much going on. There's so much choice for everybody.
One of the things, Patty, that you did is you weren't going to conform to what was expected of you, going to secretarial college or whatever, anything like that. You went and got that job in Elizabeth Arden.
Yeah.
And then you were spotted, something happened. And you took the chances. And I wonder if it's also just being open to taking the chances that life brings your way.
I definitely think so. And I think that, we have to be brave and take that step forward.
Yeah.
Into the unknown. You're not going to die. Just be brave and take that step and then deal with it. And it's exciting. It's exciting. We can't just lay back and say, oh, poor me. I can't do anything. The world is against me, because it's not true. To break out of that little eggshell. Be brave. I think be brave is my motto. Be brave and move forward.
You've been wonderful to chat to. You're going to go and sign copies of this book, which is so incredibly enjoyable just to look at. But Patty, what next for you? What's your next project?
I don't know. I'm still promoting the book. I'm going to Japan at the end of this month for a week. And I would love it. I'd love to have a film of my life. I think that would be really a lovely thing to be part of.
Like a documentary or a dramatised version or what?
Larger than a documentary.
Larger than a documentary, a big feature film.
Yes, would that be fun?
Be brave. Let's make it happen. You
Yes.
see, if you think a feature film is going to be made of your life, perhaps it will.
Yes. You never know. We never know.
You never
What's
know.
round the corner?
Who would you have playing you?
Taylor Swift.
Marvellous.
That should do it.
Marvellous. Taylor Swift. We put this out into the universe. You know how to get to us. Cambridge Literary Festival will pass the message on if it comes back. You're going to go and sign books. So delightful to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for coming this evening. Patty Boyd.
Thank you.